Okay. Bonsoir tout le monde, ici Catherine Ousselin avec Susie Hennessy, Catherine Ritz, Tracy Rucker, and Rebecca Bluewolf. We are excited to welcome you to our second of a 5-series webinar series on how we're going to survive a wonderful year together as students and teachers. We're going to be doing the next sessions again in September and October, so if you haven't seen all of that, I'm going to share the screen. We're just going to do a little quick introduction to our series and to where you can find all of our materials. We have so much that we'd like to share with you today, But let's just get started by showing you a couple things on our website. First of all, let's do this. Let's make sure that's all off. You should have received the webinar 2 series materials, and that has all the links to our presenters' ideas. We did kind of the flipped learning style. So each presenter made a short video, or they shared some resources. You can take some time again and watch those. Those are available for you. There was also the Padlet. Okay, so if you hadn't had a chance yet to get to the Padlet, where we were posting questions for Rebecca, for Catherine, and for Tracy, okay, that is still available for you. We're going to be in breakout groups in just a few moments where you'll be able to add some more. So where would you find all of this? If you were on FrenchTeachers.org, that's the ATF website, you would go to Resources, Virtual Learning and Professional Development. When you click on that, okay, here is the announcement for our series. You see that we're today, August 18th, moving from interpretive to interpersonal tasks. Next will be September 8th, assessment and feedback in the hybrid classroom, September 29th, and then we're going to be finishing out on October 20th with reflections on success and next steps for the future. So if you go to this link right here, it says ATF YouTube webinar playlist. You will find all of the webinars that we've been doing since March. So here's our March and April, and then our summer series, etc. Plus, each of the webinars will be recorded and added into, physically put into the webinar materials. At the end of this session today, you'll be able to go back, and there is a reflection form that you will be filling out. That's the webinar 2 reflection form. If you did with webinar 1, then you remember this. It's a little bit different this time. We're just going to ask you to put your email in twice because sometimes people put little spaces or they spell their name wrong or something happens. That's okay. And then we've got a few questions for you just to do some attendance verification. If you don't fill that out today, that's fine, but we want to try and get that in so that our staff at the AATF headquarters can take care of getting you a participation certificate for this, okay? Let's see what else I wanted to tell you about. If you go on there, there are other, you can look at module 1, which was last time. We've got the chat transcript and the webinar recording right on there. That is available for everyone. The benefit of being a member is that you got to come in to the live session and connect with our presenters one-on-one. And we thank you all. If you are, you must be an AATF member because you're here and you got first priority. Wonderful time to be a French teacher and with the ATF. We are excited to welcome you and share this, these webinars with you because French teachers, we have had to stick together for many, many years in many ways. And because of that, we are stronger. We're like the German teachers. The German teachers think they are just as incredible as we are, and they are. The Spanish teachers, they kind of tend to float around and do their thing, and they survive because, of course, Spanish will always survive, but French teachers have been doing this so well for so many years. And I recognize that it's maybe a good thing to meet online like this because we actually get to meet more people this way. But moi, j'ai bien beaucoup parlé aujourd'hui, donc je vais continuer. Tonight, our presenters are Rebecca Bluewolf from Wesley Public Schools. She's also the ACTFL Teacher of the Year. It's such an exciting year for Rebecca to share her knowledge, her expertise, her experiences, and some of her challenges that she had this year. Catherine Ritz is from Boston University, and she's a current AATF president. And Tracy Rucker, he's at the Louisville, depending where you're from, Collegiate School, and he is current AATF Kentucky president, and he also is with the Société Honoraire. So I'm going to ask Rebecca if she wants to chime in and welcome, and then we'll just move on to everybody, just a real quick hello, and then we'll break out and talk more even.
Sure. So, bienvenue à toutes et à tous. It's very funny for me. I've been in like super duper vacation mode. So I just had to like dig out my Zoom shirt and figure out that the webinar started 30 minutes before I thought it did to kind of get into school mode. And it's certainly not an August like I've ever known. So I just can't say enough about the spirit of community and the generosity of other teachers, because I know that's how we're going to get through this year. And yeah, I was delighted to give a presentation just to think about that input to output piece in terms of the topic for this webinar. And I think that can provide some structure when it just seems like there's so many choices and you could do anything this year because everything's different. And so I think sometimes just coming down to those basics can be a helpful reminder. So yeah, really looking forward to answering some questions tonight.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And if you haven't had a chance to go watch Rebecca's NFLC keynote presentation, please, I feel like I've just got everything settled in my life and I know what I'm going to do, but Rebecca 100% reassured me and called me and put me in a new place of acceptance for what we're about to. That is a gift, Rebecca. Thank you for being our Teacher of the Year for ACTFL, and thank you for being an AATF member and leader. Thank you. Catherine.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be back for the second webinar. Yeah, I don't know. I'm freaking out, I'll be honest with you, as an educator and also as a parent, and seeing what's happening for I have 3 children, what they're gonna be facing. So these are crazy times. I keep saying to myself, I'm looking forward to looking back on this. So I think we'll get through it in the end. And one thing positive, we've all just learned and grown so much. Like, I have pushed and challenged myself. I'm exhausted. I know we're not done yet, but I do feel like I've just grown so much as a teacher. So trying to, look on the bright side of things, but it's definitely challenging. And anyway, I'm happy to be here and hopefully share and learn also from everyone else. So nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. Tracy, welcome. This is your first time with us.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say that, I'm in my 26th year of teaching, and I am so excited this year for a number of reasons, and I'll just hit one big one. The American Association of Teachers of French really was challenged to put together meaningful PD this summer. I have no idea how much work went into that, so I would be remiss if I didn't even start there. I was so excited to go to Trois-Rivières. I love it up in the North American part of things, in that area. But I also believe that things happen the way they are meant to happen. The seminars the webinars that were online really brought together hundreds of French teachers from all over the world in one session. And I just kept seeing this large group of people. So that has excited me. If I sit here and say that I'm completely comfortable going back to school, you could sell me a river, right? But I know that we're all in different situations. I look forward to answering questions about interculturality, moving from the interpretive mode to the presentational as well as the interpersonal mode. So thank you for being connected, and certainly as we present, feel free to take down our contact information, and I will just say that I'm always excited to receive emails from people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And if you were part of our summer webinar series for the convention, Tracy did a beautiful closing day webinar, and we'll put that link for viewing his presentation in the chat in just a moment. So next, Susie, do you want to pop in and say hello? Just a quick.
Sure, just briefly, I'm Susie Hennessy. I'm a regional rep for the southwestern part of the country, and I'm happy to see such great turnout here.
what we're going to do now is send you into about 30 breakout rooms. You'll have about 8 to 9 people in each one. These are going to be random. Your duty, this is like having a billion students all at once, right? We've got 200 and some people in here, 258 people all chatting at once. We're going to put you in these small breakout rooms with 8 to 9 people. Your job is to choose one person, if this is possible, who is going to go and take after you've had a chance to throw out your burning questions, just to greet, hello, where I'm from, you know, my situation. We don't need to go too long because we're only going to have 10. Add those questions, those burning questions to our Padlet. So when you get into that room, find a good person who will go to the Padlet, and then we will give you about 10 minutes, and I'll just pop in and check up on people. So now the Padlet is now in the chat. Go ahead and click on that. And I'll put that one more time in there. Okay, so you'll be able to click on that. That will take you out. But then when you come back, please come and click on that Zoom meeting icon at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, so that you can join the room that you're being sent to. And if you have any questions, yep, we'll come in. And for the presenters, you are welcome to unmute yourself so that we can get you back up here in the front. So I just want to remind you of a few quick things on my shared screen. We have a beautiful picture of all of us. Let's try this. If you're looking for the curated resources of the AATF, so that is where you can find so many authentic and thematic resources that we've curated. So for example, on our YouTube channel, our Pinterest page, our Digo bookmarks, our Wakelets, everything that you could possibly need, you can always go there, and I'm going to put that right in the chat for you. And another thing is, of course, that if you were not able to go visit all of the presenters' flipped materials, okay, you can go and watch that, because Rebecca made a video, Catherine made a video, and Tracy made a video, plus they shared some other resources for you. And if you didn't get that, I'm going to share it one more time in the chat, and I'm going to share a different view of it. It's called the presenter version of it. So, oops, let's make sure that gets out to everybody that's in this meeting. There we go. And we'll go like that. Okay, so there you can click on that one. And then we were looking at the chat while you were in there, and we've got a lot of general questions, and some of them aren't exactly about the interpersonal communication, but we're going to move to the next stage of this. I'm going to stop the share. If there's anything you need, put it in the chat box, and I will be viewing that. Let's just hit stop share a second. Okay, so Susie, do you want to start us off with our first question? We'll take about 2 minutes for each one.
Sure. And because there are so many general questions, I'm going to go, first of all, to the questions that are directed to specific presenters. Okay. So the first question that we have is for, sorry, I'm going to scroll down. For Rebecca, a question that has to do with how your students were able to respond about their favorite activities beyond what was included on your infographic. Did they recycle previously learned words, or were there additional interpretive activities beyond the one you shared in your presentation?
Sure, sure. And I did try to type in answers on the Padlet too. So if folks have other questions there, hopefully they're seeing some answers. Yeah, pretty much every word that my students knew pertaining to activities came from some authentic resource that they had worked with in that unit. So I didn't show you every piece of every lesson, because it would have been a very long presentation for you all then. But that's where, when they're coming up with these phrases where you're like, oh my gosh, how does a 6th grader know how to say whatever? They don't know how to say that. They've seen a picture of it with a word next to it on some infographic, and they were like, oh yeah, that's my thing. That's what I like to do. So that's where the words are coming from. And then usually once we've been through a bunch of resources and I'm getting a sense of what the class is really interested in, I'll try to create a vocab list at that point of, okay, these are the words that we're really using a lot that seem like what you need. And, you know, 80% of that I could have told you before the kids walked in the room. Like, there's certain things that everybody's going to need. But then you get that quirky class where there's, like, you know, the girls who love to ride horses, or, you know, whatever, boys who collect shoes, and then you need some extra expressions. So I like to kind of wait on a vocab list until we've worked through some authentic resources and I'm kind of getting a sense of what's appealing to the kids.
Thank you. So
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Catherine, a question for you regarding the 5-finger rule. Could you explain that, please?
Sure. And so, yeah, I think the question was, I've never heard of this before. So I mentioned I have 3 children, and when my kids were learning to read in kindergarten, first grade, second grade is the first time I heard of the 5-finger rule. And I thought, oh, this is a nice way to think about selecting an appropriate resource. I'm going to put a link in the chat from Scholastic, the children's publishing, that talks a little bit about that. They mention in this article that it is an oversimplification of a difficult process. So choosing a reader, something to read, or perhaps listen to, that's at an appropriate level. The idea really is that on the one hand, like 0 to 1, so the idea is you look at a child picks up a book, and they look at the words. If I know, if there's only 0 to 1 words I don't know, it's too easy for me. And if there's 5 words I don't know, it's too hard. So you want to find something in between. So it isn't a hard and fast rule. It's just sort of thinking about when you're selecting an authentic resource for your learners. On the one hand, picking something that's too easy, maybe they need that sometimes. It's just like we want to just, give them something that they can feel really strong with. On the other hand, that's not going to challenge them, but we don't want to over challenge them. So finding a balance in between, that's really what it's all about.
Okay, thank you. And there were a couple of questions for folks on how you choose your resources and how do you decide what a good resource is. And maybe Catherine and you could start, and Rebecca, you also got that question.
Sure, I can start with this. So what I talked about in the presentation a little bit was picking features of an authentic resource that will help ensure that it's comprehensible for your learners. So if you're thinking about, in the same way that when we're speaking in the target language, we use a number of strategies. We ensure that we're using visuals, body language, gestures, cognates, that type of thing. When we're selecting a resource, a lot of the same things can come into play. So if you're looking, for example, at an infographic or at a video, if it has a lot of visual images, so that's going to support comprehension. If there's an organizational structure, so an easy one to think about is like a recipe that might have like step 1, step 2, step 3. So there's some organization to it, and that helps it make it a little bit more accessible for your learners. So those are a few of the things. So I won't repeat it. I did go over that in the presentation a little bit, but that might give you a little bit of additional things to think about. So you're thinking about the sort of non-linguistic features of the authentic resource. So again, the structure, the visuals, etc., as well as the linguistic ones. So how many words are they probably not going to know? Are there some cognates here? Does it have a target feature that I'm working with? But those would be some of the things I'm looking for.
Some other considerations might be making sure that your students have an opportunity in your class to interact with authentic materials that are both a mirror for their identities and experiences and a window. So I want to make sure that if I have students who come from adopted families or students who have same-sex parents, students who are part of blended families, I want to make sure that when I'm choosing authentic resources about families, that they're going to see themselves in the kinds of resources. And I'm not just showing like the 1950s mom and dad and the 2 kids kind of thing. So that's that mirror piece. But even if I taught like the most conventional class of like all kids from some other zone where like everyone was exactly the same, I would still want to expose my students to the beautiful diversity of our world by making sure that our class became sort of a window for them. And I do think in a world language class, that's a pretty heavy responsibility. And there are definitely times when I'll look back on a text I chose a couple years ago and I'm like, oh, was that really the best you could do, Rebecca? You know, like, so thinking about, if you haven't watched the TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, I think that really illustrates how when we choose a resource, our students are going to believe like, this is the way it is in France. This is the way it is in Haiti. This is the way it is in Quebec City. And so something that I learned from a colleague of mine was this idea of the rule of 3 and thinking about, if I'm going to show what's going on in schools in Cameroon, I'm not going to pick one authentic resource about a school in Cameroon. I'm going to try to show them 3 schools, and not 3 very similar schools, but like to show that range. I think kids And I think by showing them, sometimes if we show them an authentic resource about the United States and they see how we're depicted, they're kind of shocked, like, that's not me. So it's okay, so let's think about that lens when we choose our resources. So absolutely everything that Catherine said, because there's that frustration tolerance and you want that gentle, loving push forward, but not too much. But I think the content piece, you know, there's a lot to think about there too.
Susie. Did I have lost Susie for a moment? Okay, 2 seconds while we try and find Susie. Catherine, I will find another question here. Just 1 moment. Let's see. Here's a question for Tracy and for everyone actually. How do we fairly evaluate comprehensibility when the student's speech is hampered by mass, distance, and tech glitches?
Well, I'll start because one of the big questions is what, would I expand in terms of the online portfolios? So I want to just address it with that sort of angle. So online portfolios allow students to really create with language on their level and then just really slightly beyond their proficiency level. Okay, so the authentic resources that Catherine and Rebecca talked about have to always have a little bit of an edge to them. They don't, like if I'm a novice low student, I need to be interacting with something that's kind of closer to the novice mid or novice high so that there's a little bit of growth in there, right? So I think that's an important piece. And how do we evaluate it? I think I try to keep things really, really simple. I'll actually share my screen. I think I have the ability to do that.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so I just want to share the, okay, so that is one form of the online portfolio, but I wanted to go right into this document, which, let me stop share and then share again, just to make sure that it picked it up. Okay, there we go. All right, so I want to just, I think you're now looking at my online portfolio document, correct? Okay, perfect. So it's really a way for students to organize material, and I actually sort of reduced the content on this. So the number one thing is the goal is for students to create at their level and just beyond their level. Okay, they are going to choose a platform that interests them. So I haven't updated the formats, the formats of this yet, because I think there's some other things out here. But some of my favorites have in fact been Padlet, Blogger, and Google Sites. Okay, so they're going to collect items that reflect cultures and that they're going to be able to use throughout their learning process so that they can actually show you what they can do. I want students using, they don't use scanners anymore, so this is a little bit old. I still use mine though, but they can use all types of iPads and cell phones to really upload material into their portfolio. This is their landing page and where they're really constantly showing me what they can do. Okay, and then step 5, there is my simple rubric. And I wanted to address this because I wanted to say to teachers out there who are all trying to find ways to assess, we need to keep it simple. We need to really keep it simple. I don't want to give a really long rubric. I'm always looking for like 4 to 5 categories. What does the vocabulary look like? Does the grammar hold things together in some kind of comprehensible way? What is it aesthetically pleasing? Are you showcasing for me what you're able to do at this point? So my students who will create their portfolios next week, I'm looking at next week. I'm not really looking at 6 weeks down the road. So I wanted to really address the question by saying to you that the online portfolio is one tool that you can consider for that purpose of continually assessing. I have actually flipped my sort of mindset. I'm going with the frame of mind of more formative assessments, less summative assessments, because you get what you get at the end. If it's formative, you can always reflect. So I think I'm over my 2 minutes.
You're perfectly fine. Thank you, Tracy. Actually, I have one more question for you while you're here. Okay. At 27.32 in your video, this person is exact. You describe what seems to be the structure of an extended prof-student conversation designed to help the student begin to use the target features he hasn't previously used. How would you incorporate this kind of conversation into a virtual class?
Oh, absolutely. I'm doing that right now. I mean, today was rough because I was trying to engage, the French 2 students, and it was a little tricky. So I'm talking from experience. So what I decided to do, I decided to use a couple of resources. There's a French teacher on French Teachers that posted a digital word wall. I mentioned her in my presentation. I can't remember her name right now. So I showed that to the students. They were able to latch onto those words and use them. This or that. Someone posted something about the little activity of this and that. You have to start with those smaller activities, even with the higher level students, because they're building the confidence back, right? And so you need to give them opportunities to really give you the soft language pieces so that you can then hit them with rejoinder cards, like first of all, and then let them sequentially create. And then thirdly, I think it is, let them get into breakout rooms if you're comfortable doing that, or else just keep them all together. Okay, depends on the number of kids. I like to use the breakout rooms because I think that my students really do sort of take it seriously. But again, not everybody can do that. All right, so if that's not an option for you, take it off the table. So to get to the teacher to student speaking, circling, I'm an OPI certified teacher, so I circle all the time. And then I shared something about the OPI strategies that are actually incredibly useful for distance learning. You're one-on-one and you're going back and forth and you're not giving the students a chance to actually start falling asleep. You're just asking one question after another. And then you incorporate lots and lots of images and lots of culturally rich videos.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm going to throw out another wild random question, unless Susie's back on. Susie? We'll give her a few seconds. Okay.
I like random. Go ahead. I like random.
Well, okay. This one might be a little bit more directed. I found one for Catherine. Okay. So do you believe that there is a place or time for English in the French immersion classroom? You mentioned all is in French. For example, some believe that if the text is in French, the questions and answers can be in English to determine whether or not the text was comprehended. Thoughts? And that's for all of our presenters. And then I'm going to go back here and get my IPA book. Go for it.
Well, so this is one of my favorite questions, and I have a strong opinion on this particular one. I see Rebecca's kind of laughing. She probably has heard me talk about it before. So here's my spiel on the 90% plus. So the actual expectations, 90% plus. The 90% does not mean 100%. So I find that starting with the 10% and when am I okay using English is the right way to go, and sort of articulating for yourself, when is English appropriate in my classroom? And then for me, like, that's freeing when I was always like freaked out about, did I hit 90%? Did I use French 90%? How much did I translate? And then I sort of stopped and went the other way and thought first, like, okay, when should I be using English? When am I okay with it? And then the rest of it was like, oh, so then I don't have to worry about the French piece anymore. So here's my quick when I feel strongly when English is appropriate. So basically it all boils down to, am I focusing on content or am I focusing on processing my learning? And if you're processing learning, by which you're doing, like, what is the objective? Am I reflecting on my learning? I'm writing a journal reflecting on my growth. I'm setting goals for myself as a learner, or the teacher's giving an objective. Now the question about assessment questions. So ACFL would say, I believe, that if you're doing a reading assessment, so you're testing their reading skills or listening skills, the questions, you could choose to put them, there we go, the IPA book, you could choose to put those questions in English if you feel that that's appropriate, so that you don't get like a false, they didn't misunderstand the question, but understood the reading passage. I think that one's actually a little bit your decision, depending on where you feel your learners are. So I personally feel very strongly about, like, my classroom time is precious. So the time that I have with my learners, and now we've lost so much time. And if you're virtual or you're seeing them, however often you are seeing your learners synchronously, then that's precious time for me. So I want to try to maximize the amount of target language use. But anything that's processing, so goal setting and so on. All of that said, with my strong opinion on that, we're in such an unusual and scary time right now that I do think, you know, or worrying about the social and emotional well-being of our learners might take precedence over, you know, at the beginning of the year, particularly like checking in with them. How are they doing? I might feel comfortable like using a little bit more English to get the year going, just to really check in with my learners. But I would say that falls into processing learning. And then when I'm looking at content, I feel okay. So that's my spiel. I don't know if Rebecca or Tracy want to add anything.
Oh, Catherine's taught me a lot of what I know about this, so I would go with what she said. I think another thing that I've heard you say that I think is wise, Catherine, is that, you know, if the kids are having trouble staying in the target language, then maybe the task is not appropriate for the learners. And so if you have to give a 15-minute English explanation for how to do something, okay, if it's something you're going to do every week for the rest of the year, take those 15 minutes. You are not wasting that time. But if it's happening every day, then there's probably too much going on. And so I think, you know, at the beginning of the year, there's a lot of stuff we want to put in place. And I think we have to be careful about how much English are we using to put things in place versus how much are we really establishing the course as a place where we use French. And so that, to me, that's a hard balance. I would always err on the side of trying to do more getting, you know, dans le bain with French with the kids early, because I think they're so freaked out by like, it's the beginning of the year, what am I wearing? Who's sitting next to me? Or who's next to me on my Zoom? Or why is my mom making breakfast and you can hear it on the, or whatever. Like, they're not listening to all the important information about how the course runs and what the expectations are. Like, just save that for, you know, later, I would say, and then some of that can happen in English. But I do think it's nice to kick off with a lot of French. And I think it was the earlier AATF session, is that right, Catherine O, where Christopher Moorhead kind of explained it. Was that right? No.
He hasn't been on ours, but maybe an ACTFL or an NL
somewhere. Basically, the idea would be, could you start your class in, no, sorry, it was Caleb Howard. I get them confused.
Oh, gosh,
Caleb Howard.
Caleb.
And basically his thing is like, can you start the class without words? And then once you get the kids doing the routines just through gestures, then you add in words, at which point you can add them in French because the kids already know what's going on from all the movement. So that's a different approach if you find yourself getting hung up with just like which word, is to try to do a no word approach.
And I just want to add very quickly that, you know, I teach multiple preps, like probably 95% of us, and I like to find a resource that I can use for levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's extremely difficult. But it's a question of how do you frame the questions? Yesterday, I asked one of my wonderful friends out in Los Angeles to help me with some pictures from Senegal. And I've asked her to really help me understand what's going on in the picture so that as a non-native speaker, I can then craft novice, intermediate, low, mid, and high questions that will connect all of those. I never worry about if I stop and use English. I don't worry about that. I don't ever say that I'm a 100% French speaker in class, because that's not true. I'm also not in an immersion program. What I say to teachers when I'm talking and presenting is that, yes, I agree with Rebecca. When you need to take that little bit of time to explain something, do it. You know, even in my French 4 class last year, my kids were like confused about some word that they just were stuck on when we were reading Les Miserables. Well, I had to go ahead and explain it, you know, and so I think you just have to balance it out. I say the highest percentage that you can reach in the target language, go for it. But the key though, the key is to get the kids speaking to each other. It's not just, you know, AATF talks about this, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. The real trick is, how do I get the kids to do it? And they have to have those small connecting times where they're not being judged and not being graded on their speaking. You know, I had a kid who connected with me every Sunday at 2 o'clock this summer just to talk with me in French. And this kid grew exponentially because I never stopped and corrected things. I would put words in the chat for him, okay? And he was so appreciative. And you know what was going on though? He was really turning around and learning those words so quickly and using them right away. Now, of course, it was one-on-one, but those are some strategies that I just really talk to teachers about. Number one, find a task, find a product that you can use on multiple levels. Number two, give those kids some soft opportunities. Give them some questions, even if they're super basic, they're still speaking. And the thing about it is, if you give an intermediate low student an intermediate high kind of question, well, yes, you're gonna get what you get, you know. But if you give that intermediate low student a novice high question that will give that child some confidence, you're gonna get what you get.
Gosh, Tracy, thank you. I just get all excited when you do that. It is all about empowering our students and their voices. And Rebecca, when I saw her on the stage, and she had a statement about every child deserving to learn this. If we're cutting them off with little grammar things, with little points of, you said that wrong, of their accents, you're not going to get that child at on a Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. We are here in this situation now. We're going to do a quick little wave thing. So can you just give us a wave if you are hybrid teachers, like you're going to be at school some days and you're going to be maybe teaching students who are at home. You've got both parts, okay? You can put
I do too, but I don't have a camera, so
thank you. That's okay. You can always use the reactions down at the bottom, but okay. And how many of you are 100% distance learning? Distance, okay. So look at that. We have these options. How many of you are face-to-face 100% and there are no other options? Lauren, I'm looking at you. Okay. The way that Tracy just put that out there is all of our speakers say this, that we've got to just not think of this as typical class school life. Okay, this is not how we learned in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s if you are that young, right? This is not our French teacher's experience. So I'm going to ask one more general question to the whole group, and we'll see what you think on this one. It was quite an interesting question about using Edpuzzle. It says, we need interpretive resources other than Edpuzzle that will support the interpersonal task, and that it's framed so students can't cheat. Okay, lovely presenters, do you have any thoughts on that?
Wants to go first?
Yeah, Catherine, you're unmuted, so you're going to go first.
Unmuted. I mean, Edpuzzle is nice, so students can't cheat. You know, this question's been coming up a lot for those facing the distance. We don't see the kids at home. We can't see if they're cheating or not. And I hear that concern. And I also wonder about, I think it's a challenging one. I wonder about the types of assessments we're giving them, and whether we can think about structure. So if we're really focusing on, so this session's about interpretive and interpersonal. So if we're really focusing on interpretive and interpersonal, are we structuring in such a way that they're focusing on something authentic, we're getting a real reaction from them, and we're not just finding the right answer? That's my sort of quick reaction to it. I guess personally, I feel slightly less stressed about cheating. I'm not really too worried about it. I really worry about giving the kids feedback and thinking about their growth. So my personal opinion on grading is I hate it. I think it's a waste of everyone's time, and I would love to just give feedback. So I care so little about the grade, and my opinion, I'm like, yeah, you get an A, I don't care. I want you to grow. And I know that we're in the world that we're in where we have to give a numerical grade or a letter grade. So I hear that concern. On the other hand, I do feel, you know, if all we're doing is assessing kids who are right and wrong answer, and then that makes it easy to cheat, then we're doing them a disservice. So can we structure it in a way that we have to, so if they're doing an interpersonal prompt, we have to be able to give them feedback, and then they can grow and do a stronger one, or some way where we can kind of build from that, and not just focus on, you know, true, false, multiple choice. That's my quick reaction. I don't know, Rebecca or Tracy want to jump in and help me out, because I think this is a tricky one.
Yep. Yeah. I think if our top decision point for choosing any sort of assessment is whether or not students can cheat, we're probably leaving out a lot of other really important things that should guide our decision making. One idea might be, and there are definitely people in my department who do this, is not to assess the interpretive mode and to say, I will know what you understood from the authentic resources when I hear you do your presentational and interpersonal work. So when I ask you to have a conversation about, you know, what you like to eat for breakfast, and then what you've read about French-speaking people around the world and their breakfasts, I better be hearing that resource that we read, you know, about the Quebecois breakfast, and I want to hear something that references that infographic from Paris, and then, oh, do you remember that video that we watched in Cameroon where the kids were coming to school for breakfast? So you're not assessing each of those points as a, you know, a summative grade, but you expect the students to have developed their understanding so that it serves a purpose, which again gets back to the idea of the interpretive really being a springboard for subsequent productive tasks. So that might be one. I also just wanted to highlight in the chat, Stephanie Carbonneau, who spends a lot more time on ed tech stuff than I do, said ed puzzle equivalents that are better include Fluent Key and PlayPosit. So if you're just looking for other ways, those are two. If you're looking for something that kind of runs like ed puzzle, but for written text, you might explore Actively Learn. I use that a little bit in the spring. You can import a text or a website, and then you can put the questions in the text at certain moments, and you can give all the feedback online like you would with Edpuzzle. A lot of it can be auto-graded. But again, I think if we are ruled by trying to keep kids from cheating, we're really cheating them of a rich education.
And I would like to just add right there, Rebecca, that many teachers may not know that Madame Shepard, Lisa Shepard, has created this incredibly detailed link. I don't know where I was going with that. That contains Fluent Key clips that are organized thematically. And I think it might be posted on French Teachers in the United States.
Yes,
I'll
several
look it
times.
up for us now.
Yeah.
Can I jump in with, I see one more question that came up in a number of forums. There are teachers who are teaching in the classroom and also have students at home. And so how do you work on interpretive tasks when you have two audiences in two different places?
I'm nervous to take this one because I haven't yet taught. And I mean, I don't know who amongst us has yet already experienced this. That's how I am being asked to teach. I haven't started yet. And that's also what my middle school child is going to be experiencing. I will be honest that I have a lot of reservations about that as a strong pedagogical model. I worry that it's like the worst of both worlds. You can't do distance well, you can't do in person well. I feel like it's like working from home while also taking care of your kids. Like both of them are kind of suffering. So that's my little disclaimer, but we might be faced with that. I actually went and visited my son's, they had let us do a self-guided tour of his classroom, of his school today to see kind of the new routes for social distancing, and was chatting with one of his teachers who happened to be in there. So all the desks are spread out. They're gonna have like 10 kids sitting at their desks spread out, and then the other 10 at home Zooming in. So it's simultaneous. So that's what the model's going to be. So the students in the class aren't allowed to interact with each other. I guess they could call to each other, but they're not allowed to turn and face each other. So when they need to do breakout work or work in pairs, they will be doing it on Zoom. So the kids in the class they have laptops, they have to have them open to Zoom throughout the whole class. The kids at home are already on Zoom. And then the teacher does whatever her lesson is and then puts them to work in pairs. And this teacher is actually a science teacher, is doing a lot of project-based learning. And so she says, well, I guess I'm gonna, share what I share, and then, they'll have a little breakout group and she'll just put them in. So half the kids in the class will join this group. And so that's the way that she's addressing it. And as much as I think that that's a really hard model, that seems like a way that might work to keep the interaction going, given the limits to social distancing that we're seeing within the classroom. So I think we can still do all of this. I think to the best that we can, holding strong to the principles of proficiency-based instruction. We need to stay flexible and adapt to the model we're in, but that might be one way to think about keeping it going. So you're just using a lot of different tech tools for both the people in person and at home.
Okay, so we are at the 5 o'clock on the Pacific Coast, the later time out there on the East Coast. What we've done in the past now is just throw out a few more thoughts to kind of like last minute points, etc. Kind of our sunset chat in 2 minutes for each presenter. And then if you wish, I will stay on and answer tech questions. Okay, so ask Catherine anything about tech. That's what everybody thinks I do, but I swear to God, I also teach. We have this plan for our 5 series is that you can interact, that we're asking you to interact with our presenters' materials before, watch their videos, and then come in and ask the questions. So a couple of people were asking about that in the chat, like, was I supposed to interact with that before? That's kind of our hope, is that that's how I'm teaching with my students. I'm going to send them my materials, their formative activities. And then when we come into our Zoom class for 40 minutes, I'm just going to be answering their questions and kind of working one-on-one with them. So Tracy, we'll start with you. Do you have any last minute ideas on interpretive to interpersonal tasks or activities?
Sure, I think the interpretive, that can just be anything from just a Twitter blog, which I like to use because it's kind of current for students, to a cover of a magazine that has some interesting content, and really using the same words that you find in those short texts, even a micro text or a meme, using those same words to get students to internalize a short conversation is key to moving from interpretive, where you're just taking in material. That's the reason why I'm so big on Yabla videos, because they are 100% native speakers already vetted, okay? And putting all that information in, and then really interacting with the words in a really sort of, it doesn't even have to be all that creative, interacting with the words and then speaking about it. And that takes you to the face-to-face, and then making the experience personal for students. I think those are my final kind of comments. Yes.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I'll just come back to that metaphor of the springboard. And I think, your authentic resources only have merit if they are the jumping off point for a subsequent productive task. So I think each of us could probably spend every minute between now and the beginning of the school year or Thanksgiving just finding authentic resources, because there's so much out there. And I would suggest that really we just need a couple of good ones. And then the real work is now, what do I do with that gets the students coming back and listening again and reading again, and then using that to have some sort of meaningful conversation or writing about what they've learned. And so, I think as long as you're and also, that the interpersonal task can't be the beginning point. Like, the kids need to have that input. They need to work with the language. They need to see other people saying it, other people writing it before we ask them to produce. But I think if that's guiding your work, that really gives a lot of shape to what we're all about.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And congratulations again, Rebecca, on a beautiful 2020. It is your year, and we are so grateful to have you as our French ACTFL Teacher of the Year. Everyone just needs to you have been such a leader to us. No, you are hearing this because I am so honored to know you. Thank you so much. Catherine, last thoughts?
Well, I agree with both of what Rebecca and Tracy said about the structure of it, moving from the input to output, using whatever the resource is. I think in some ways I would say perhaps this year, as scary as it is an opportunity to let go of some outdated, the practices, and just focus on, I'm going to start with a great authentic resource and just keep cycling through from interpretive to interpersonal to presentational, and then another resource on the topic. I mean, that could be kind of freeing in a way, as scary as it is. And I did want to comment because I see some, although it's gotten kind of far back in the chat, some people feeling just sort of stressed and anxious and like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. And it totally is. I just want to acknowledge that. I actually broke down crying yesterday because I went to the dentist and I got they had to ship me a cast, and it was just so overwhelming for me. I broke down crying and I was like, this is not normal. So I just wanted to say, I think we're all really overwhelmed and stressed, but we can do this. And I think, thank you, Catherine Ruslan, for organizing this and allowing us to get together and share with each other, which I think we need this. So thank you.
Okay, this is a trifold. This is Susie and Catherine working together.
And Susie, yes, thank you.
Yes, and Susie, we're all working.
Can I jump in really quickly? I know that many of you had questions on the Padlet that were not addressed. I've been working on those. I'm trying to answer the ones that I have answers for and point you to some resources. So even when the session is over, go back and take a look at that Padlet. Yeah, maybe your question will be answered.
Thank you, Susie. That's great background work. See, you know, when people put on, if you've been watching the ACTFL series or the AATF series, we're just all back here. You've seen the ducks paddling underwater meme. That's us. We're just working our tails off as you don't even see it. It just looks flawless, of course, of course. Okay, we're going to stop the official recording. Okay.